Question 1. Operational review demonstrates that a forensic investigator is tasked with analyzing a large volume of digital media for evidence of data exfiltration. The investigator utilizes a file signature database within their forensic software to identify various file types. To ensure the admissibility and reliability of the findings, which of the following actions is most critical for maintaining regulatory compliance and professional integrity within the U.S. legal framework? Option A. Using a proprietary file signature database that is not publicly documented or validated by independent forensic bodies, assuming it is comprehensive. Option B. Relying solely on the file extension of a file to determine its type, as this is the most straightforward method for initial classification. Option C. Prioritizing the speed of analysis by disabling signature database checks and relying on heuristic analysis alone for file identification. Option D. Regularly updating the file signature database with the latest vendor releases and performing periodic validation checks against known benign and malicious file samples to confirm accuracy and reduce false positives. The correct answer is D. Regularly updating the file signature database with the latest vendor releases and performing periodic validation checks against known benign and malicious file samples to confirm accuracy and reduce false positives. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to maintain the integrity and admissibility of digital evidence within a legally defined framework. The CISSP with a computer forensics concentration must balance technical accuracy with strict adherence to the governing regulatory landscape. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the tools and methodologies employed in digital forensics, specifically the use of file signature databases, align with established legal precedents and evidentiary rules to prevent the exclusion of crucial findings. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the validation and maintenance of file signature databases in accordance with established forensic standards and legal requirements. This ensures that the identification of file types is accurate, reproducible, and defensible in a legal proceeding. Specifically, within the U.S. regulatory framework relevant to CISSP, this aligns with principles of evidence handling and admissibility, such as those outlined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology (NIST) in their Computer Forensics Tool Testing Program (CFTT) guidelines, which emphasize tool validation and the integrity of forensic processes. Maintaining up-to-date and validated signature databases is crucial for demonstrating that the forensic analysis was conducted using reliable methods, thereby supporting the chain of custody and the integrity of the evidence. An incorrect approach that relies on proprietary, unvalidated, or outdated file signature databases presents significant regulatory and ethical failures. Such an approach risks introducing errors in file identification, leading to misinterpretation of evidence. This can result in the exclusion of critical evidence by a court, undermining the entire investigation. Ethically, it violates the duty of professional diligence and the obligation to present accurate findings. From a legal standpoint, it fails to meet the Daubert or Frye standards for the admissibility of scientific evidence, which require that the methods used be generally accepted within the scientific community and have a known error rate. Using unvalidated tools or data can be seen as a failure to exercise due care and professional judgment, potentially leading to a mistrial or wrongful conviction/acquittal. Another incorrect approach, such as solely relying on file extensions for identification, is fundamentally flawed from a forensic perspective. File extensions are easily manipulated and do not guarantee the actual file type. This method lacks the technical rigor required for forensic analysis and would almost certainly be challenged and deemed inadmissible in court, representing a failure to adhere to accepted forensic methodologies and a disregard for the principles of evidence integrity. Professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable legal and regulatory frameworks governing digital evidence in the relevant jurisdiction. This includes familiarity with rules of evidence, case law concerning digital forensics, and relevant industry standards and guidelines, e.g., NIST, ISO. When selecting and utilizing forensic tools, including those that rely on file signature databases, professionals must prioritize validation, verification, and documentation. This involves understanding the source of the signature database, its update frequency, and any validation processes it has undergone. If a proprietary database is used, efforts should be made to understand its validation methodology or to cross-reference findings with other validated sources. Documentation of the entire process, including the specific database version used and the validation steps taken, is paramount for defensibility. Question 2. Regulatory review indicates that in the event of a confirmed data breach impacting personal information, specific notification requirements are triggered under the relevant U.S. federal and state laws. A security incident has occurred where unauthorized access to a database containing customer names, addresses, and partial credit card numbers has been detected. The forensic investigation is ongoing, but initial findings suggest that the full credit card numbers were not exfiltrated, though the partial numbers and other personal identifiers were accessed. Considering the potential for identity theft and financial fraud, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action from a regulatory and forensic perspective? Option A. Defer all notification requirements until the forensic investigation is fully complete and all potential impacts are understood, to avoid premature disclosure and potential legal complications arising from incomplete information. Option B. Focus solely on containing the incident and eradicating the threat, with notification and reporting to be addressed only if the investigation conclusively proves that sensitive personal information was compromised and harm is highly probable. Option C. Immediately issue a public statement and notify all affected customers and relevant regulatory agencies, detailing the incident and the types of data accessed to ensure maximum transparency and compliance with potential breach notification laws. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to definitively determine the scope of data accessed and the potential for harm, while simultaneously preparing a draft notification for regulatory bodies and affected individuals based on preliminary findings, to be issued upon confirmation of a notifiable breach. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to definitively determine the scope of data accessed and the potential for harm, while simultaneously preparing a draft notification for regulatory bodies and affected individuals based on preliminary findings, to be issued upon confirmation of a notifiable breach. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in computer forensics and incident response, balancing the need for rapid containment and investigation with strict legal and regulatory obligations for data breach notification. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying what constitutes a breach under relevant regulations, determining the scope of affected data, and adhering to notification timelines and content requirements without compromising the integrity of the investigation or causing undue panic. The CISSP with a computer forensics concentration must navigate these complexities, understanding that a misstep can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough, evidence-based assessment of the incident to determine if a notifiable data breach has occurred according to the specified regulatory framework. This involves meticulously documenting the incident, analyzing the nature and extent of the compromised data, and assessing the risk of harm to individuals. By following this methodical process, the organization ensures compliance with legal mandates, protects the rights of affected individuals, and maintains its credibility. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible data stewardship mandated by regulations. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately consider the legal and regulatory implications of the incident. One incorrect approach might involve immediate, broad notification based on initial suspicions, without a proper forensic analysis. This can lead to unnecessary alarm, resource misallocation, and potential legal repercussions for over-notification or premature disclosure of unverified information. Another incorrect approach could be to delay or omit notification due to a desire to avoid negative publicity or to complete the investigation without considering the strict timelines imposed by regulations. This failure to comply with notification requirements can result in severe fines, legal action, and a loss of public trust. A third incorrect approach might involve a superficial assessment of the data compromised, leading to incomplete or inaccurate notifications, which also violates regulatory requirements and fails to adequately protect individuals. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the specific regulatory framework governing data breaches in their jurisdiction. This involves establishing clear incident response plans that include protocols for forensic investigation, risk assessment, and legal consultation. When an incident occurs, the process should involve 1. Immediate containment and preservation of evidence. 2. A detailed forensic analysis to determine the nature, scope, and impact of the incident. 3. A risk assessment to evaluate the potential harm to individuals. 4. Consultation with legal counsel to interpret regulatory obligations. And 5. Timely and accurate notification if a notifiable breach is confirmed, adhering to all specified content and timing requirements. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a critical data breach investigation requires evidence located on servers hosted in a foreign country. The forensic team needs to obtain logs and user activity data from a cloud service provider operating within that foreign jurisdiction. Which of the following actions represents the most legally sound and procedurally compliant approach for acquiring this evidence? Adhering strictly to international legal frameworks and best practices for cybercrime investigations. Option A. Rely on informal communication with contacts within the foreign country's law enforcement agency to obtain the data on a voluntary basis, without formal documentation. Option B. Initiate a formal request for assistance through the established Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLAT, process with the foreign government, working through appropriate legal channels to compel the service provider's cooperation. Option C. Proceed with seizing the data directly from the foreign servers, asserting jurisdiction based on the origin of the data breach and the nationality of the affected organization. Option D. Directly contact the foreign cloud service provider and request the data, assuming their terms of service permit such direct requests for law enforcement purposes. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal request for assistance through the established Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLAT, process with the foreign government, working through appropriate legal channels to compel the service provider's cooperation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in international cybercrime investigations, where evidence resides across multiple jurisdictions. The primary difficulty lies in navigating the complex web of differing legal frameworks, mutual legal assistance treaties, MLAT, and data privacy regulations. A forensic investigator must balance the need for timely evidence acquisition with the imperative to adhere to international legal norms and the sovereignty of other nations. Failure to do so can result in inadmissible evidence, diplomatic incidents, and compromised investigations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the critical importance of understanding and leveraging established international legal mechanisms for evidence gathering. Specifically, engaging with the appropriate national authorities to initiate a formal request through a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLAT, is the cornerstone of legally sound international cybercrime investigations. This process ensures that evidence is obtained in a manner that respects the sovereignty of the involved nations and complies with their respective legal requirements, thereby increasing the likelihood of its admissibility in court. This aligns with best practices in international law and the principles of comity between nations, as recognized by international legal scholars and practitioners. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly requesting data from a foreign service provider without formal legal channels. This bypasses established MLAT and can violate the data privacy laws of the foreign jurisdiction e.g., GDPR if the data is in the EU or similar national laws. Such actions can lead to severe legal repercussions for the investigator and the organization they represent, including fines and criminal charges, and render the obtained evidence inadmissible due to illegal seizure. Another incorrect approach is to assume that evidence located on servers within a country is automatically subject to the requesting country's laws, regardless of the server's physical location. This ignores the principle of territorial sovereignty, a fundamental tenet of international law. Each nation has the right to govern activities within its borders, including the handling of digital evidence. Proceeding without respecting this can lead to legal challenges and evidence suppression. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal communication channels with foreign law enforcement without initiating formal MLAT procedures. While informal contact can be a starting point, it is insufficient for legally compelling the production of evidence. Without a formal request through an MLAT, the foreign entity may have no legal obligation to cooperate, and any voluntarily provided information may lack the necessary legal foundation for admissibility in court. Professional reasoning. When faced with international cybercrime investigations, a CISSP with a computer forensics concentration must adopt a methodical, Legally informed approach. The decision-making process should prioritize understanding the legal and regulatory landscape of all involved jurisdictions. This involves consulting with legal counsel specializing in international law and cybercrime, identifying the relevant MLAT or other international agreements, and meticulously following the prescribed procedures for evidence requests. Proactive engagement with national and international law enforcement agencies, coupled with a commitment to ethical and legal data handling, forms the bedrock of successful and defensible international cybercrime investigations. Question 4. Process analysis reveals a network intrusion where suspicious outbound connections are detected. The forensic investigator needs to determine the nature and origin of this malicious activity. Given the common attack vectors involving web-based exploits and email exfiltration, which investigative approach best aligns with comprehensive network forensics principles and U.S. federal evidentiary standards for identifying the source and intent of the traffic? Option A. Analyze DNS queries for suspicious domain resolutions, correlate these with subsequent HTTP requests to those domains, and examine any associated SMTP traffic for related communications or data exfiltration. Option B. Investigate only the DNS resolution logs to identify potentially malicious domain names that were queried by internal systems. Option C. Examine only the HTTP request logs to identify any anomalous web browsing activity or communication with known malicious websites. Option D. Focus exclusively on analyzing SMTP traffic logs to identify any unusual email sending or receiving patterns that might indicate data exfiltration. The correct answer is A. Analyze DNS queries for suspicious domain resolutions, correlate these with subsequent HTTP requests to those domains, and examine any associated SMTP traffic for related communications or data exfiltration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, identifying the source of malicious network traffic when multiple protocols are involved. The difficulty lies in correlating evidence across different layers of the TCP/IP model and understanding the specific roles of each protocol in the observed activity. A forensic investigator must not only identify the traffic, but also determine its origin and intent, which requires a nuanced understanding of how these protocols interact and how they can be exploited or misused. The challenge is amplified by the need to adhere to strict legal and regulatory frameworks, ensuring that the investigative process and the evidence collected are admissible in legal proceedings. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic analysis of network traffic logs, focusing on the interplay between DNS, HTTP, and SMTP. DNS is crucial for resolving domain names to IP addresses, which is often the first step in a targeted attack or communication. HTTP is the protocol used for web-based communication, frequently exploited for malware delivery or command and control. SMTP is used for email, a common vector for phishing and malware distribution. By examining DNS queries for suspicious domains, correlating them with HTTP requests to those domains, and then investigating any associated SMTP traffic, e.g., emails sent to or from compromised systems related to these domains, an investigator can build a comprehensive picture of the malicious activity. This layered approach, starting from name resolution and moving through application layer protocols, aligns with the principles of digital forensics and the requirements of evidence integrity. In the context of CISSP with a computer forensics concentration, this methodical examination ensures that all relevant data points are considered, leading to a more accurate and defensible conclusion. Adherence to the specified regulatory framework, assumed to be U.S. federal regulations for this exam context, such as those governing digital evidence in federal court, e.g., Federal Rules of Evidence, dictates that the investigation must be thorough, unbiased, and documented meticulously to maintain the chain of custody and ensure admissibility. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on HTTP traffic without considering DNS resolution, would miss the initial reconnaissance or targeting phase, potentially leading to an incomplete understanding of the attack vector. For instance, if the malicious domain was resolved via a compromised DNS server or a malicious DNS record, ignoring DNS would leave a critical gap. This failure to investigate all relevant protocol layers could be seen as a deficiency in due diligence, potentially impacting the admissibility of evidence if the investigation is deemed incomplete by legal standards. Analyzing only SMTP traffic would overlook web-based exploits or command and control channels that do not involve email. While email is a common attack vector, many modern threats leverage HTTP or other protocols. An investigation limited to SMTP might miss significant malicious activity, rendering the forensic report incomplete and potentially misleading. This narrow focus could violate the expectation of a comprehensive forensic examination required by legal standards. Investigating only DNS traffic would provide information about name resolution, but would not reveal the actual content or purpose of the subsequent communication. While identifying suspicious DNS queries is important, it is only the first step. Without examining the protocols that utilize these resolved addresses, like HTTP or SMTP, the investigator cannot confirm malicious intent or the nature of the threat. This incomplete analysis would fail to meet the burden of proof required in legal proceedings. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic, layered analysis of network traffic. This involves understanding the function of each protocol within the TCP/IP suite and how they can be exploited. The framework should include 1. Defining the scope of the investigation based on initial indicators. 2. Systematically collecting and preserving evidence from relevant sources, logs, packet captures. 3. Analyzing evidence at each protocol layer, correlating findings across layers. 4. Documenting all steps, findings, and conclusions meticulously, ensuring chain of custody. 5. Validating findings through cross-referencing and independent verification. This approach ensures that the investigation is thorough, accurate, and defensible, meeting both technical and legal requirements. Question 5. Implementation of a forensic investigation into a suspected data exfiltration incident requires the examination of file system artifacts on a suspect workstation. The primary objective is to identify and preserve any evidence related to the unauthorized transfer of sensitive information, while ensuring the integrity of the original data. Which of the following approaches best adheres to the principles of digital forensics and ensures the admissibility of collected evidence? Option A. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect workstation storage media using write-blocking hardware, and then conduct all analysis on this read-only image. Option B. Perform analysis directly on the suspect workstation's live operating system, using forensic tools to examine file system structures in real time. Option C. Directly copy relevant files and directories from the live operating system to a separate storage device for analysis. Option D. Utilize operating system utilities to extract file system metadata, and then manually reconstruct file system activity based on this extracted information. The correct answer is A. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect workstation storage media using write-blocking hardware, and then conduct all analysis on this read-only image. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the need to preserve the integrity of file system artifacts while simultaneously extracting relevant evidence for an investigation. The professional challenge lies in balancing the technical requirements of forensic imaging with the legal and procedural mandates of evidence handling. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen method does not introduce alterations that could render the evidence inadmissible or misleading. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the creation of a bit-for-bit copy of the original storage media. This forensic image is a write-protected replica, ensuring that the original data remains unaltered. This aligns with the fundamental principles of digital forensics, which mandate that evidence must be collected and preserved in a manner that maintains its integrity and authenticity. In the context of the CISSP with a computer forensics concentration, this adherence to integrity is paramount for meeting legal standards of evidence admissibility and for maintaining the credibility of the forensic process. The use of write-blocking hardware or software is a standard and legally recognized method for achieving this. An incorrect approach that involves directly copying files from the live system without proper imaging fails to uphold the principle of data integrity. This method can lead to the alteration of file system metadata, e.g., access times, modification times, as the operating system interacts with the files during the copying process. Such alterations can be exploited by defense counsel, to challenge the authenticity and reliability of the evidence. Furthermore, it bypasses established forensic procedures, potentially violating internal organizational policies and best practices that are often implicitly or explicitly tied to legal admissibility standards. Another incorrect approach that involves analyzing the live system directly without creating an image introduces significant risks. The act of running analysis tools on a live system can itself alter the very artifacts being investigated, including file system structures, logs, and temporary files. This makes it impossible to definitively prove that the observed state of the system is representative of the state at the time of the incident. This directly contravenes the requirement for forensically sound evidence collection, which demands a static, uncompromised copy of the original data. Finally, an approach that relies solely on user-level file copies without considering the underlying file system structures and metadata is insufficient. File system artifacts, such as slack space, unallocated clusters, and journaling information, often contain crucial evidence that is not accessible through simple file copies. Ignoring these artifacts means potentially missing critical pieces of evidence, which can compromise the thoroughness of the investigation and lead to incomplete or inaccurate conclusions. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the depth required for comprehensive computer forensics. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the evidence collection objectives, the technical constraints of the media, and the legal and procedural requirements for evidence handling. Prioritizing forensically sound methods, such as creating a bit-for-bit image using write-blocking technology, should be the default approach. Any deviation from this standard must be rigorously justified and documented, with a clear understanding of the potential risks to evidence integrity and admissibility. Question 6. Compliance review shows that a digital forensics team is tasked with acquiring evidence from both traditional hard disk drives, HDD, and solid-state drives, SSD, seized during an investigation. The team needs to ensure the integrity and admissibility of the acquired data. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional forensic best practices for handling these distinct storage media? Option A. For HDD, form a bitstream image using a hardware write blocker. For SSD, connect them directly to a forensic workstation and use specialized software to extract only user-accessible files, bypassing the need for a full image. Option B. Utilize a hardware write blocker for all drives and perform a bitstream image of each drive, ensuring that any SSDs are placed in a read-only mode via firmware commands before imaging. Option C. Employ a hardware write blocker for all drives and use standard operating system file copy utilities to acquire data from both HDDs and SSDs, prioritizing speed. Option D. Use a hardware write blocker for all drives and perform a bitstream image of each drive, assuming that the imaging process will capture all relevant data regardless of the drive type. The correct answer is B. Utilize a hardware write blocker for all drives and perform a bitstream image of each drive, ensuring that any SSDs are placed in a read-only mode via firmware commands before imaging. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for thorough evidence acquisition with the practical limitations and unique characteristics of different storage media. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate forensic approach for each drive type, considering its impact on data integrity, acquisition speed, and the potential for data loss or alteration. The CISSP with a computer forensics concentration must demonstrate a deep understanding of how HDDs and SSDs differ in their internal workings, and how these differences dictate forensic methodologies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it acknowledges the fundamental differences between HDDs and SSDs. For HDD, a bitstream image is the standard and most reliable method, ensuring that every sector is captured, including slack space and deleted file fragments, without altering the original data. This aligns with the principle of preserving the integrity of the original evidence, a cornerstone of digital forensics and a requirement for admissibility in legal proceedings. An incorrect approach would be to apply the same acquisition method to both HDDs and SSDs without considering their distinct architectures. For instance, attempting a direct sector-by-sector imaging of an SSD without proper precautions can lead to inaccurate results due to wear leveling and garbage collection mechanisms. These processes can remap physical blocks, making a simple bitstream image potentially incomplete or misleading. Furthermore, improper handling of SSDs, such as powering them on without write-blocking mechanisms or using standard operating system tools, can trigger internal firmware operations that alter the data, compromising the forensic integrity of the evidence. This failure to adapt methodology to the specific storage medium constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it can lead to the exclusion of evidence or the misinterpretation of findings, undermining the pursuit of justice and the principles of professional conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the type of storage media. For each identified media type, they must then research and apply the most current and accepted forensic acquisition techniques. This involves understanding the underlying technology of the device, its potential for data volatility, and the specific challenges it presents to forensic analysis. A critical step is to always use write-blocking hardware or software to prevent any modification of the original evidence. Finally, documentation of the entire process, including the rationale for choosing specific tools and techniques, is paramount for ensuring transparency and defensibility of the forensic findings. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a forensic investigator to consider the most appropriate method for disseminating findings from a critical security incident investigation, ensuring compliance with U.S. federal reporting requirements and organizational policies. Given the sensitive nature of the data and the potential legal ramifications, which reporting approach best upholds professional and regulatory obligations? Option A. Immediately share preliminary findings with senior management to inform urgent business decisions, with detailed documentation to follow once the investigation is fully complete. Option B. Disseminate initial findings to the IT security team for immediate remediation efforts, pending a formal report to management at a later date. Option C. Provide a comprehensive, verified, and formally documented report to the designated legal and compliance departments, adhering to established organizational reporting timelines and procedures. Option D. Hold all findings until the investigation is exhaustively concluded, ensuring absolute certainty, and then submit a single, final report to all relevant parties simultaneously. The correct answer is C. Provide a comprehensive, verified, and formally documented report to the designated legal and compliance departments, adhering to established organizational reporting timelines and procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the forensic investigator to balance the immediate need for information with strict legal and regulatory reporting obligations. The pressure to deliver findings quickly to stakeholders, particularly management, can lead to premature or incomplete reporting, potentially jeopardizing the integrity of the investigation and exposing the organization to legal repercussions. The investigator must navigate the complexities of evidence handling, chain of custody, and the specific reporting requirements mandated by relevant U.S. federal laws and regulations applicable to information security and computer forensics, such as those outlined by NIST guidelines and potentially industry-specific regulations if applicable. Though not explicitly stated, the CISSP context implies a broad understanding of such frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes adherence to established reporting protocols and legal obligations. This involves documenting all findings meticulously, verifying evidence integrity, and ensuring that the final report is comprehensive, accurate, and delivered through the appropriate channels as defined by organizational policy and legal requirements. This aligns with best practices in computer forensics, which prioritize defensibility and admissibility of evidence. Specifically, in the U.S. context, this means ensuring that reporting complies with standards that would withstand legal scrutiny, such as those promoted by NIST special publications, e.g., SB 800-86, SB 800-100, and any internal corporate policies derived from these or other legal mandates. This approach protects the organization by ensuring that actions taken are based on validated information and that all legal reporting duties are met, thereby minimizing risk of litigation or regulatory penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. Reporting findings directly to management without formal documentation or verification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established procedures, potentially leading to decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information. It also compromises the chain of custody and the integrity of the forensic evidence, making it inadmissible in legal proceedings and violating principles of sound forensic practice. Sharing preliminary findings with IT personnel before formal reporting is also problematic. While collaboration is important, sharing unverified or incomplete data can lead to misinterpretations, unauthorized actions, or the inadvertent destruction of evidence. This violates the principle of controlled dissemination of sensitive forensic information and can undermine the investigation's credibility. Delaying the report until all possible avenues of investigation are exhausted, without any interim communication or adherence to mandated reporting timelines, can also be detrimental. While thoroughness is crucial, an indefinite delay can hinder timely decision-making by stakeholders and may violate organizational policies or legal requirements that stipulate specific reporting windows for incidents. This approach fails to manage stakeholder expectations and can lead to operational disruptions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach that prioritizes evidence integrity and legal compliance. This involves 1. Understanding and adhering to all applicable U.S. federal laws, regulations, and industry best practices, e.g., NIST guidelines, governing digital forensics and incident reporting. 2. Following established organizational policies for evidence handling, documentation, and reporting. 3. Communicating findings through designated channels and at appropriate stages of the investigation, ensuring all reports are verified, comprehensive, and defensible. 4. Maintaining meticulous records of all investigative steps, findings, and communications. 5. Seeking legal counsel when in doubt about reporting obligations or the admissibility of evidence. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a critical server has been compromised, and immediate access to logs and user activity data is required to identify the attacker's actions. The storage media containing this data is the only source. Given the urgency, what is the most appropriate and forensically sound method to ensure the integrity of the evidence while enabling analysis? Option A. Mount the compromised storage media in read-only mode and manually browse the file system to locate and copy suspected files. Option B. Utilize operating system tools to extract the required log data and user activity information, assuming the operating system's integrity is not compromised. Option C. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the affected storage media using a hardware write blocker, and conduct all subsequent analysis on this image. Option D. Directly access and copy the relevant log files and user activity data from the live file system of the compromised server to a separate storage device. The correct answer is C. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the affected storage media using a hardware write blocker and conduct all subsequent analysis on this image. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in computer forensics where the integrity of evidence is paramount, but the urgency of a situation might tempt a less rigorous approach. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely information with the absolute requirement to preserve the original evidence and maintain a forensically sound chain of custody. The potential for misinterpretation or alteration of file system metadata, which is crucial for reconstructing events and establishing timelines, makes this a high-stakes situation. A CISSP with a computer forensics concentration must navigate this by adhering strictly to established forensic principles and relevant legal frameworks, even under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the affected storage media before any analysis is performed on the original data. This is a cornerstone of digital forensics, mandated by best practices, and often implicitly or explicitly required by legal standards for evidence admissibility. By imaging the drive, the forensic analyst creates an exact replica, ensuring that the original evidence remains untouched and unaltered. All subsequent analysis is then conducted on this image, preserving the integrity of the original data. This aligns with the principles of non-repudiation and the need to present verifiable evidence in legal or investigative proceedings. The use of write blockers during the imaging process further guarantees that no accidental writes occur to the original media, reinforcing its integrity. This method is essential for meeting the evidentiary standards required in jurisdictions governed by frameworks like the U.S. legal system, where the Daubert or Frye standards for admissibility of scientific evidence are relevant. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly analyzing the live file system on the original storage media to quickly identify relevant files. This is ethically and legally unacceptable because it directly modifies the original evidence. File system operations, even simple ones like viewing file properties or directory listings, can alter metadata such as access times (A-time), modification times (M-time), and change times (C-time). These changes can render the evidence unreliable, making it inadmissible in court. This violates the fundamental forensic principle of preserving evidence integrity and can lead to the dismissal of a case or severe professional repercussions. Another incorrect approach is to copy only the suspected files from the original media without creating a full forensic image. While this might seem efficient, it bypasses the critical step of preserving the entire context of the file system. Metadata associated with the file's location, its relationship to other files, and the overall file system structure is lost. This incomplete capture can lead to misinterpretations and makes it impossible to verify the integrity of the copied files against the original state of the storage media. It fails to meet the rigorous standards for digital evidence collection and analysis, potentially compromising the investigation. A third incorrect approach involves relying solely on the file names and directory structures as presented by the operating system's user interface, without verifying the underlying file system metadata. Operating systems often present a simplified view and may not accurately reflect the raw data on the disk. File system structures, such as master file tables, MFT, in NTFS or inodes in Unix-like systems, contain critical metadata that can be manipulated or corrupted. Ignoring this underlying structure and metadata means that the analysis is based on potentially incomplete or misleading information, which is a significant ethical and professional failing in computer forensics. Professional reasoning. Professionals in computer forensics must adopt a systematic and principled approach. The decision-making process should always prioritize evidence integrity and adherence to established forensic methodologies. This involves 1. Understanding the legal and ethical obligations within the relevant jurisdiction. 2. Identifying the critical data and the potential impact of any analysis on its integrity. 3. Employing forensically sound tools and techniques, such as write blockers and forensic imaging software. 4. Documenting every step of the process meticulously, including the tools used, the methods applied, and any observations made. 5. Analyzing the forensic image, not the original media. 6. Maintaining a strict chain of custody for all evidence. In situations of urgency, the focus should be on expediting the forensically sound processes, not on circumventing them. Question 9. Investigation of a suspected insider threat involves examining an employee's company-issued laptop and their personal cloud storage accounts. The employee's company email is hosted by a third-party provider, and the investigation requires access to email content stored on the provider's servers for the past 6 months. What is the legally required method to obtain this email content under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act (ECPA)? Option A. Obtain a court order demonstrating probable cause for the email content from the third-party email provider. Option B. Request the email content directly from the third-party email provider based on the employer's directive. Option C. Secure a subpoena from the employee's employer authorizing the seizure of their email communications. Option D. Execute a search warrant on the employee's physical devices, assuming it covers all associated digital communications. The correct answer is A. Obtain a court order demonstrating probable cause for the email content from the third-party email provider. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where an investigator must balance the need to gather evidence with strict legal and privacy requirements. The core difficulty lies in determining the legal authority required to access electronic communications that may be stored by a third-party service provider. Mishandling this can lead to inadmissible evidence, legal repercussions for the investigator and their agency, and violations of privacy rights. The investigator must navigate the nuances of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act (ECPA) to ensure their actions are lawful. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves obtaining a court order or subpoena that specifically authorizes the seizure and examination of the target's email communications from the Internet Service Provider (ISP). Under ECPA, particularly Title Roman II Stored Communications Act, accessing stored electronic communications generally requires a higher legal standard than simply requesting subscriber information. A court order, issued upon a showing of probable cause, is typically required for content of stored communications that have been in electronic storage for more than 180 days. For communications stored for less than 180 days, subpoena may suffice for certain types of information, but accessing the content often necessitates a court order. This approach ensures compliance with ECPA provisions designed to protect the privacy of electronic communications, thereby making the gathered evidence legally sound and ethically defensible. Incorrect approaches analysis. Requesting the information solely based on a verbal agreement with the suspect's employer is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. ECPA does not recognize informal agreements as a substitute for legal process when accessing electronic communications. This bypasses the legal safeguards established to prevent unauthorized surveillance and privacy violations. Demanding the information directly from the CISSP without any legal process, even with a stated belief that the suspect is involved in illegal activity, is a direct violation of ECPA. This constitutes an unlawful interception or access of electronic communications, exposing the investigator and their agency to severe legal penalties and rendering any obtained evidence inadmissible. Obtaining a warrant for the suspect's physical devices, but not specifically for their email communication stored remotely by an ISP, is insufficient. While a warrant may allow for the seizure of devices, it does not automatically grant the authority to access data held by a third party, especially when that data is considered stored communication under ECPA. The legal authority must be specific to the type of data and its location. Professional reasoning. Professionals in computer forensics must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal framework governing electronic evidence, in this case ECPA. 2. Identifying the type of data sought, subscriber information, metadata, or content, and its storage status in transit or stored. 3. Determining the appropriate legal process required for each type of data and storage status, e.g., subpoena, court order, search warrant. 4. Consulting with legal counsel to ensure the chosen legal process is valid and covers the scope of the investigation. 5. Documenting all steps taken, including the legal authority obtained and the methods of evidence acquisition. This systematic approach ensures that investigations are conducted lawfully, ethically, and that the integrity of the evidence is maintained. Question 10. What factors determine the most appropriate method for acquiring non-volatile data from hard drives and SSDs in a computer forensics investigation conducted under U.S. federal law? Option A. The need to preserve data integrity through write blocking, the type of storage media, HDD/VS, SSD, and the requirement for cryptographic hashing to verify the forensic image. Option B. Speed of the acquisition process and the ability to directly copy files from the operating system for immediate review. Option C. The priority of acquiring volatile data first, and then proceeding with non-volatile data acquisition without specific integrity controls for the latter. Option D. The use of standard backup software that can quickly create a copy of accessible files and folders. Correct answer is A. The need to preserve data integrity through write blocking, the type of storage media, HDD/VS, SSD, and the requirement for cryptographic hashing to verify the forensic image. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Acquiring non-volatile data from hard drives and SSDs in a computer forensics context presents significant challenges. The primary challenge lies in ensuring the integrity of the data throughout the acquisition process. Any alteration, however minor, can render the evidence inadmissible in legal proceedings. Furthermore, the increasing complexity of storage media, particularly SSDs with their trim functionality and wear leveling algorithms, complicates traditional acquisition methods. The need to balance speed with thoroughness while adhering to strict legal and ethical standards requires careful consideration and a robust decision-making framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of data integrity and chain of custody, aligning with the principles of digital forensics and relevant legal frameworks such as the U.S. Federal Rules of Evidence, FREE, and established best practices like those outlined by NIST. This involves using write-blocking hardware or software to prevent any modification of the source media. The acquisition process should be documented meticulously, including the tools used, their versions, and the steps taken. The resulting forensic image should be verified using cryptographic hashing, e.g., SHA-256, to ensure its authenticity and that it is an exact replica of the original data. This approach ensures that the evidence is admissible and defensible in court, upholding the ethical obligation of the forensic examiner to present accurate and untainted data. Incorrect approach is analysis. Directly copying files from the operating system bypasses the fundamental principle of data integrity. This method can inadvertently modify file timestamps, access control lists, and other metadata, thereby compromising the evidence. It also fails to capture deleted data or slack space, which can be crucial for an investigation. This approach violates the evidentiary standards required for digital forensics and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the legal implications of evidence handling. Acquiring data using standard backup software without proper forensic procedures is also unacceptable. Such software is not designed to preserve the forensic integrity of the data and may alter file structures or metadata during the backup process. Furthermore, it typically does not capture the full disk image, including unallocated space, which is essential for comprehensive forensic analysis. This method fails to meet the stringent requirements for digital evidence and can lead to its exclusion in legal proceedings. Performing a live acquisition of volatile data, e.g., RAM, and then proceeding to acquire non-volatile data without first ensuring the integrity of the non-volatile source media is a flawed strategy. While live acquisition is a valid forensic technique for volatile data, it does not address the critical need to protect the non-volatile storage from modification during its acquisition. The focus must remain on the non-volatile acquisition first, using appropriate write-blocking measures before or concurrently with other acquisition phases to maintain the integrity of the primary data source. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and regulatory requirements of the jurisdiction. This involves identifying the specific rules of evidence and any relevant case law pertaining to digital evidence. The next step is to assess the nature of the storage media and the potential challenges it presents, e.g., SSD vs. HDD encryption. Based on this assessment, the examiner selects appropriate forensic tools and techniques that are validated and known to preserve data integrity. Documentation is paramount at every stage, from initial seizure to final reporting. Finally, a thorough verification process, including hashing, must be conducted to confirm the integrity of the acquired data. This systematic approach ensures defensible and ethically sound forensic practices. Question 11. When evaluating the acquisition of digital evidence for a potential legal proceeding under U.S. federal rules, a forensic investigator has captured a bit-for-bit copy of a suspect's hard drive. The investigator has also generated an MD5 and SHA-1 hash of the acquired data. However, the image file itself does not contain any embedded metadata regarding the case, the examiner, or the acquisition process, and it is not in a widely recognized forensic image format. Considering the need for defensible evidence, which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements for admissibility and integrity in a U.S. legal context? Option A. The investigator should proceed with the raw image format, as the external MD5 and SHA-1 hashes are sufficient to prove data integrity in any legal proceeding. Option B. The investigator should rely on file copies and screenshots of the suspect's data, as these are easier to manage and present in court. Option C. The investigator should convert the raw image to a proprietary format that offers advanced compression features to reduce storage space. Option D. The investigator should prioritize using a standard forensic image format like E01, which inherently supports metadata and integrity verification, over a raw image format that relies solely on external hashing. Correct answer is D. The investigator should prioritize using a standard forensic image format like E01, which inherently supports metadata and integrity verification, over a raw image format that relies solely on external hashing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, selecting the appropriate forensic image format for evidence acquisition. The challenge lies in balancing the need for data integrity, chain of custody, and the practicalities of storage and transport, all while adhering to the legal and regulatory framework governing evidence in a CISSP with a computer forensics concentration context. The specific jurisdiction for this exam is assumed to be the United States, focusing on federal rules of evidence and common law principles applicable to digital evidence. The professional must demonstrate an understanding of how different image formats impact the admissibility and defensibility of digital evidence in legal proceedings. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves selecting a forensic image format that provides a verifiable hash of the original data and metadata about the acquisition process, such as E01, in-case evidence file format. This format is widely accepted in the digital forensics community and by courts because it includes features like compression, metadata storage, case information, examiner details, acquisition time, and internal integrity checks, e.g., MD5 and SHA1 hashes for the entire image and individual segments. These features directly support the principles of data integrity and chain of custody, which are paramount for evidence admissibility under rules like the Federal Rules of Evidence, FREE, in the U.S. The ability to verify the integrity of the acquired image against the original data is crucial for demonstrating that the evidence has not been tampered with, a key requirement for its acceptance in legal proceedings. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using a raw image format, like DD, without accompanying documentation or verification mechanisms, presents significant regulatory and ethical failures. While DD images are bit-for-bit copies and can be forensically sound, they lack inherent metadata and integrity checks. This makes it difficult to prove the chain of custody and verify that the image has not been altered without relying solely on external hashing and documentation, which can be more prone to error or dispute. This failure to adequately document and verify the evidence can lead to its exclusion in court, violating the principles of due process and the rules of evidence. Choosing a proprietary, non-standard image format that is not widely supported by forensic tools or accepted by the courts is another critical failure. Such a format would likely lack the necessary validation mechanisms and interoperability, making it challenging to present the evidence in a legally defensible manner. This could be seen as an ethical lapse, as it hinders the fair administration of justice by potentially introducing doubt about the evidence's authenticity and integrity. Failing to acquire a forensic image altogether and instead relying on file copies or screenshots would be a severe violation of forensic best practices and legal requirements. This approach completely bypasses the principles of data integrity and chain of custody, as file copies can be easily altered, and screenshots do not capture the underlying data or system state. This would almost certainly lead to the exclusion of such evidence in any legal proceeding, representing a fundamental misunderstanding of forensic principles and legal admissibility standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes evidence integrity and legal admissibility. This involves understanding the requirements of the specific legal jurisdiction and the accepted standards within the digital forensics community. When selecting an image format, the primary consideration should be: 1. Does the format support verifiable integrity checks hashing? 2. Does it preserve essential metadata related to the acquisition? 3. Is the format widely supported and accepted by forensic tools and legal bodies? 4. Does it facilitate a clear and defensible chain of custody? By consistently applying these criteria, professionals can ensure that the digital evidence they collect is robust, reliable, and admissible in legal proceedings, upholding their ethical obligations and professional standards. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new intrusion detection system, IDs, would significantly reduce the likelihood of unauthorized access to critical financial data, but the initial deployment cost is substantial. A thorough risk assessment, considering the potential for violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act (CFA) and the associated legal liabilities, is required to justify this investment. Which approach best aligns with the principles of risk assessment and legal compliance under the CFA? Option A. Focus the risk assessment primarily on the operational disruption caused by potential intrusions, downplaying the legal ramifications and the specific requirements of the CFA regarding unauthorized access and damage. Option B. Conduct a detailed assessment of the potential financial losses from data breaches and unauthorized system access. Quantify the probability of such events, and evaluate the proposed IDS's effectiveness in mitigating these specific CFA-related risks, thereby justifying the investment based on a clear reduction in legally actionable threats and potential damages. Option C. Undertake a simplified cost-benefit analysis that compares the IDS cost against the estimated cost of a single, hypothetical data breach, without a comprehensive evaluation of various CFA violation scenarios or the system's overall risk mitigation capabilities. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of the IDS based on its perceived technological superiority and the general industry trend towards advanced threat detection, without a specific analysis of its impact on CISSP compliance or a detailed quantification of risk reduction. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed assessment of the potential financial losses from data breaches and unauthorized system access, quantify the probability of such events, and evaluate the proposed IDS's effectiveness in mitigating these specific CISSP-related risks, thereby justifying the investment based on a clear reduction in legally actionable threats and potential damages. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a security enhancement against the risks and legal implications of its implementation, particularly concerning the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CISSP. The core difficulty lies in accurately assessing the likelihood and impact of unauthorized access and the subsequent legal ramifications under the CISSP, which can be complex and subject to interpretation. A thorough risk assessment is crucial to ensure that any proposed solution is not only effective, but also legally compliant and ethically sound. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential threats and vulnerabilities related to unauthorized access, directly aligning with the principles of risk management and due diligence mandated by cybersecurity best practices and implicitly by the spirit of laws like the CISSP. By focusing on the specific provisions of the CISSP, such as unauthorized access to protected computers and causing damage, this approach ensures that the proposed security measures are tailored to mitigate legally recognized risks. This proactive stance helps prevent violations, reduces liability, and demonstrates a commitment to lawful and ethical information security practices. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost of implementing a new security measure without a commensurate assessment of the legal risks and potential CISSP violations is professionally unacceptable. This failure to consider the legal framework could lead to the adoption of inadequate security controls or, worse, the implementation of controls that inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or misinterpretations of unauthorized access under the CISSP, potentially exposing the organization to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes perceived convenience over a rigorous legal and technical risk assessment is also professionally flawed. Such an approach neglects the fundamental responsibility of a security professional to understand and mitigate risks in accordance with applicable laws. It risks overlooking critical threats that could lead to CISSP violations, such as unauthorized access to sensitive data or disruption of critical systems, thereby failing to protect the organization's assets and legal standing. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or industry buzzwords without a structured risk assessment, particularly one that fails to consider the specific requirements and implications of the CISSP, is inadequate. This lack of a systematic and legally informed process can lead to misallocation of resources, ineffective security controls, and a failure to address the actual threats of unauthorized access and potential damage, leaving the organization vulnerable to legal action under the CISSP. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework that explicitly incorporates legal compliance. This includes 1. Identifying assets and potential threats, 2. Analyzing vulnerabilities and the likelihood of exploitation, 3. Evaluating the potential impact, including legal consequences under relevant statutes like the CISSP, 4. Determining risk levels, and 5. Selecting and implementing appropriate controls. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to adapt to evolving threats and legal interpretations. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates a potential security incident involving unauthorized access to sensitive data. As a CISSP with a computer forensics concentration, you are tasked with investigating network activity that may have facilitated this breach. Which of the following approaches best aligns with U.S. regulatory frameworks and professional ethical standards for conducting network packet capture and analysis in such a scenario? Option A. Obtain a legally valid warrant or court order specifically authorizing network packet capture within defined parameters, e.g., specific IP addresses, timeframes, protocols, related to the suspected incident, and then conduct analysis strictly within those parameters. Option B. Initiate broad network packet capture across the entire network segment where the incident is suspected, analyzing all traffic to identify the source and method of the breach, and then seek legal authorization for the collected data. Option C. Begin analyzing existing network logs and firewall records for suspicious activity, and only if insufficient information is found, proceed with network packet capture without further legal consultation, assuming a security incident justifies immediate action. Option D. Deploy network packet capture tools to continuously monitor all network traffic for any anomalies, regardless of a specific incident, to proactively identify potential threats, and then review the captured data as needed for any ongoing investigations. Correct answer is B. Initiate broad network packet capture across the entire network segment where the incident is suspected, analyzing all traffic to identify the source and method of the breach, and then seek legal authorization for the collected data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the need to analyze network traffic for security incidents while adhering to strict legal and ethical boundaries. The professional challenge lies in balancing the investigative imperative to gather evidence with the legal and privacy obligations concerning data collection and analysis. Missteps can lead to the inadmissibility of evidence, legal repercussions, and ethical breaches. The CISSP, with a computer forensics concentration, must navigate these complexities with precision. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical process that prioritizes legal authorization and scope limitation. This aligns with the principles of due process and privacy rights, which are fundamental in U.S. legal frameworks governing digital investigations. Specifically, obtaining a warrant or appropriate legal authority before initiating broad network packet capture is paramount. The analysis should then be strictly confined to the scope defined by that authority. This ensures that the collected data is legally admissible and respects the privacy of individuals not implicated in the investigation. Adherence to established forensic procedures, such as chain of custody and documentation, further strengthens the integrity of the evidence and its legal standing, as mandated by various U.S. legal precedents and best practices in digital forensics. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating broad network packet capture without explicit legal authorization, such as a warrant, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates privacy rights and can lead to the suppression of any evidence obtained, rendering the investigation futile from a legal standpoint. Such an action could also expose the investigator and the organization to civil liability. Analyzing network traffic for potential security threats without a defined scope or legal basis, even if seemingly for defensive purposes, can inadvertently capture sensitive or privileged information. This lack of defined scope is a failure to adhere to principles of proportionality and necessity, which are implicit in many legal frameworks. It risks overreach and the unauthorized collection of data, leading to ethical and potential legal ramifications. Failing to document the capture process, including the tools used, timestamps, and the rationale for the capture, undermines the integrity and admissibility of the evidence. This lack of meticulous documentation is a failure to follow established forensic best practices and can be challenged in legal proceedings, potentially leading to the exclusion of critical evidence. It also represents an ethical lapse in maintaining a transparent and verifiable investigative process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a risk-based, legally compliant approach. The decision-making process should begin with understanding the legal authority required for any data collection. This involves consulting with legal counsel to determine the necessity and scope of any forensic investigation, particularly concerning network traffic. Prioritizing legal authorization, defining clear investigative objectives, and meticulously documenting every step of the process are critical. When in doubt, seeking legal guidance is always the most prudent course of action to avoid compromising the investigation and to uphold ethical and legal standards. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the speed of incident response is a critical performance metric, leading to pressure to quickly restore affected systems. During a recent security incident involving suspected data exfiltration, the incident response team is debating the immediate next steps. Which of the following approaches best upholds forensic soundness and reliability while addressing the incident? Option A. Prioritize the restoration of critical business functions by rebooting affected systems and allowing them to boot into their normal operating state. Option B. Immediately wipe and re-image affected systems to restore them to a known good state, then begin a high-level review of logs. Option C. Create forensically sound images of all affected systems and storage media before any live analysis or remediation activities commence. Option D. Perform live analysis on the affected systems to identify the extent of the compromise and gather initial indicators of compromise. The correct answer is C. Create forensically sound images of all affected systems and storage media before any live analysis or remediation activities commence. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid incident response and the stringent requirements for maintaining forensic soundness and reliability. In the context of the CISSP with a computer forensics concentration, particularly when operating under U.S. regulatory frameworks, as implied by the CISSP common application in U.S. legal and corporate environments, the integrity of digital evidence is paramount. Any compromise to this integrity can render the evidence inadmissible in legal proceedings or unusable for internal investigations, leading to significant organizational and legal repercussions. The core challenge lies in balancing the urgency of containment and eradication with the meticulous, documented processes required to preserve the chain of custody and prevent data alteration. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of evidence integrity through a systematic and documented process. This aligns directly with the principles of digital forensics as mandated by various U.S. legal standards and best practice guidelines, such as those derived from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, publications, and established case law. By creating a forensic image of the affected system's asterisk before asterisk, any remediation or analysis is performed on the original media. The forensic examiner ensures that the original data remains unaltered. This forensic image then serves as the basis for all subsequent analysis, maintaining the chain of custody and ensuring that the evidence presented is a true and accurate representation of the state of the system at the time of the incident. This meticulous approach is crucial for admissibility in court and for building a defensible investigative narrative. An incorrect approach that involves immediate system cleanup and restoration without prior forensic imaging is professionally unacceptable due to significant regulatory and ethical failures. This action directly violates the principle of preserving the original state of the evidence. In U.S. legal contexts, failure to maintain the integrity of digital evidence can lead to its exclusion, undermining the entire investigation. This is an ethical failure as it demonstrates a disregard for due process and the principles of objective evidence gathering. Furthermore, it can lead to a loss of critical data that might have provided crucial insights into the attack vector, perpetrator, or scope of the compromise, thereby failing the organization's duty to conduct a thorough and effective investigation. Another incorrect approach, such as performing analysis directly on the live system without proper documentation and isolation, also fails to meet forensic soundness standards. Live analysis can alter system states, memory, and file timestamps, thereby compromising the evidence. This is a regulatory failure, as it deviates from established forensic protocols designed to ensure evidence reliability. Ethically, it represents a lack of diligence and professionalism, potentially leading to flawed conclusions and misdirected remediation efforts. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the incident response plan, which must include a well-defined forensic component. Before any action is taken on affected systems, the forensic team must be engaged to determine the appropriate preservation strategy. This involves assessing the type of incident, the systems involved, and the potential evidentiary value of the data. The decision-making framework should prioritize the creation of forensically sound copies of the affected media. This is followed by rigorous documentation of every step taken, from acquisition to analysis, ensuring a verifiable chain of custody. Professionals must constantly weigh the urgency of containment against the imperative of evidence integrity, making informed decisions that uphold legal and ethical obligations. Question 15. The control framework reveals that a digital forensics team has successfully acquired a forensically sound image of a suspect's laptop hard drive. Which of the following subsequent actions best adheres to U.S. federal and state regulations governing the handling and storage of digital evidence to ensure its admissibility in court? Option A. The lead investigator immediately begins analyzing the original hard drive to expedite the investigation, while the forensically acquired image is stored on an unencrypted portable hard drive in the team's shared office. Option B. The forensically acquired image is immediately written to a standard USB flash drive for temporary storage, and the original hard drive is returned to the suspect. Option C. The forensically acquired image is verified using cryptographic hashing, stored on a secure, access-controlled storage medium, and its chain of custody is meticulously documented from the point of acquisition. Option D. The forensically acquired image is copied onto a DVD-R for long-term archival, and the original hard drive is placed in a locked cabinet without further documentation of its storage location. The correct answer is A. The lead investigator immediately begins analyzing the original hard drive to expedite the investigation, while the forensically acquired image is stored on an unencrypted portable hard drive in the team's shared office. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, maintaining the integrity and admissibility of digital evidence while operating under strict regulatory requirements. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for timely analysis with the imperative to preserve the chain of custody and prevent any alteration of the original evidence. Professionals must navigate potential legal challenges that could arise from improper handling, leading to the exclusion of crucial evidence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the creation of forensically sound images of the original storage media. This is paramount because it ensures that the original evidence remains unaltered and protected. By working exclusively with a bit-for-bit copy, analysts can perform all investigative procedures without risking the integrity of the primary evidence. This practice directly aligns with the principles of digital forensics and is implicitly supported by legal frameworks that require evidence to be presented in its original, untainted state. The meticulous documentation of every step, including the imaging process, hashing, and storage, establishes a robust chain of custody, which is a critical legal requirement for evidence admissibility in U.S. jurisdictions. This adherence to best practices maximizes the likelihood that the evidence will be accepted in court. Incorrect approaches analysis, working directly on the original storage media, is a critical failure. This approach directly violates the principle of preserving original evidence. Any modification, however unintentional, can be grounds for challenging the evidence's admissibility in court, as it compromises its integrity. This is a fundamental ethical and legal failing in digital forensics. Storing the forensically acquired image on a standard, unencrypted portable hard drive without proper chain of custody documentation is also unacceptable. While the image itself might be a faithful copy, the lack of secure storage and detailed tracking of its handling creates significant vulnerabilities. This can lead to unauthorized access, accidental modification, or loss of the evidence, all of which would jeopardize its legal standing. The absence of a documented chain of custody means that it cannot be proven who had access to the evidence, when, and what actions were taken, which is a direct contravention of legal requirements for evidence handling. Using a standard USB flash drive for temporary storage of the forensically acquired image, without any form of write blocking or hashing, introduces further risks. Flash drives are prone to corruption and can be easily overwritten. The absence of hashing means that the integrity of the image cannot be verified at a later stage, making it impossible to prove that it has not been tampered with since its creation. This lack of integrity verification is a severe deficiency that would likely lead to the evidence being deemed unreliable and inadmissible. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-averse approach when handling digital evidence. The decision-making process should prioritize the preservation of evidence integrity and the establishment of a verifiable chain of custody. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal and regulatory requirements of the jurisdiction, in this case, U.S. federal and state laws governing digital evidence. 2. Implementing a standardized, documented procedure for evidence acquisition, including the use of write-blocking hardware. 3. Creating forensically sound images of all digital evidence. 4. Verifying the integrity of the acquired image using cryptographic hashing algorithms, e.g., SHA-256. 5. Storing evidence in secure, controlled environments with strict access controls. 6. Maintaining a comprehensive and accurate chain of custody log that documents every transfer, access, and action taken with the evidence. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating procedures to align with evolving best practices and legal precedents. Question 16. System analysis indicates a significant data breach has occurred, compromising sensitive customer information. The incident response team has successfully contained the immediate threat, but the full scope and impact of the breach are still under investigation by the computer forensics team. Given the urgency to inform affected individuals and regulatory bodies, which of the following actions best balances immediate forensic needs with legal obligations under U.S. federal and state data breach notification laws? Option A. Halt all notification processes until the computer forensics team completes its comprehensive investigation, providing a definitive report on the exact number of individuals affected and the precise nature of all compromised data. Option B. Focus exclusively on further forensic analysis to ensure absolute certainty about the breach's impact before any external communication is considered, prioritizing the integrity of the investigation above all else. Option C. Initiate a preliminary notification to affected individuals and regulatory bodies, clearly stating that the investigation is ongoing and providing known details, while the forensic team works to confirm the full scope and impact. Option D. Proceed with notifying all potentially affected individuals and relevant regulatory agencies immediately, based on the initial assessment of compromised data types, while the forensic investigation continues to refine the details. The correct answer is D. Proceed with notifying all potentially affected individuals and relevant regulatory agencies immediately, based on the initial assessment of compromised data types, while the forensic investigation continues to refine the details. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common yet complex challenge in computer forensics, balancing the immediate need to contain a data breach with the legal and ethical obligations to notify affected parties and relevant authorities. The pressure to act quickly to mitigate damage can conflict with the meticulous process required for proper evidence preservation and legal compliance. Missteps can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of trust. The challenge lies in making informed decisions under duress, adhering to a specific regulatory framework, and ensuring that forensic integrity is maintained throughout the response. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and preservation of evidence while simultaneously initiating the legally mandated notification process. This aligns with the principles of responsible data breach response, which emphasize minimizing harm to individuals and organizations. In the context of U.S. regulations, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for protected health information or state-specific breach notification laws, timely and accurate notification is a critical legal requirement. The forensic investigation must be conducted in a manner that preserves the integrity of the data, ensuring it can be used as evidence if necessary, and that the notification process is informed by the findings of the initial assessment. This dual focus ensures both operational security and legal compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Delaying notification until the entire forensic investigation is complete is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Many U.S. data breach laws have strict timelines for notification, and failure to meet these deadlines can result in substantial fines and legal action. This approach prioritizes internal investigation over the rights of individuals whose data may have been compromised, potentially exacerbating harm. Focusing solely on containment without initiating any form of notification or assessment of notification requirements is also problematic. While containment is crucial, it does not absolve the organization of its legal duties. This approach risks overlooking critical legal obligations and can lead to non-compliance if the breach is determined to be reportable. Initiating notification without a preliminary forensic assessment to understand the scope and nature of the breach can lead to inaccurate or incomplete notifications. This can cause undue alarm, misdirect resources, and potentially violate the spirit, if not the letter, of breach notification laws, which often require specific details about the breach. It also risks prematurely disclosing sensitive information about the investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a phased approach to data breach response. The initial phase involves immediate containment and preservation of evidence. Concurrently, an assessment of the breach's nature and scope should begin, including identifying the types of data involved and potential regulatory triggers. Based on this preliminary assessment, The organization should then initiate the legally required notifications within the stipulated timeframes, while continuing the forensic investigation to gather more detailed information. This iterative process ensures that legal obligations are met promptly and accurately, while also allowing for a thorough and defensible forensic investigation. Collaboration between legal counsel, incident response teams, and forensic investigators is paramount. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unusual outbound network traffic originating from a critical server, raising concerns about potential data exfiltration. As a forensic investigator, which of the following approaches best aligns with forensic science principles for managing this situation? Option A. Immediately escalate the incident to senior management and the legal department, requesting authorization for broad system shutdowns and data collection. Option B. Immediately isolate the server from the network to prevent further data loss and initiate a full system image for forensic analysis. Option C. Notify all employees about the potential security incident to ensure awareness and gather any anecdotal evidence of suspicious activity. Option D. Conduct a preliminary forensic analysis of the server's logs and network traffic captures to assess the nature, scope, and potential impact of the observed activity before taking definitive containment actions. Correct answer is B. Immediately isolate the server from the network to prevent further data loss and initiate a full system image for forensic analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the monitoring system's output, while indicative of potential malicious activity, is not definitive proof. The forensic investigator must balance the need for timely action with the imperative to maintain the integrity of evidence and adhere to established forensic principles. A premature or unsubstantiated conclusion could lead to incorrect actions, damage the reputation of the organization, or even have legal repercussions if the findings are used inappropriately. The core of the challenge lies in applying a systematic, evidence-based approach to risk assessment that respects the principles of digital forensics. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns directly with fundamental forensic science principles, particularly those related to evidence handling, analysis, and reporting. It emphasizes a structured risk assessment process that begins with understanding the potential impact and likelihood of the observed activity. This systematic approach ensures that any subsequent actions are proportionate to the identified risk and are supported by a clear chain of custody and verifiable data. Adhering to these principles is crucial for maintaining the admissibility of evidence in legal proceedings and for ensuring that organizational resources are allocated effectively to address genuine threats. In the context of the CISSP, with a computer forensics concentration, this aligns with the need for rigorous, defensible investigative methodologies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate containment without thorough analysis represents a regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the critical step of understanding the nature and scope of the potential threat, leading to a risk of overreaction or misallocation of resources. This could violate organizational policies regarding incident response and evidence preservation. Furthermore, acting solely on an initial observation without a proper risk assessment could lead to the destruction or alteration of crucial evidence, compromising the integrity of any subsequent investigation and potentially violating legal requirements for evidence handling. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately escalating to legal counsel without a preliminary forensic assessment is also professionally unsound. While legal involvement is often necessary, doing so prematurely, before understanding the factual basis of the potential incident, can lead to unnecessary legal entanglements and can be inefficient. It fails to leverage the expertise of the forensic team to provide a clear, evidence-based picture of the situation, which is essential for informed legal strategy. This can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in the initial stages of an incident. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a phased approach. First, acknowledge and document the initial observation from the monitoring system. Second, initiate a preliminary forensic assessment to gather and preserve relevant data, establishing a chain of custody. Third, conduct a risk assessment based on the preliminary findings, considering the potential impact, likelihood, and existing controls. Fourth, based on the risk assessment, determine the appropriate response, which may include containment, eradication, recovery, or further investigation, and involve relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel, as dictated by the assessed risk and organizational policy. This structured approach ensures that actions are data-driven, proportionate, and ethically sound. Question 18. Compliance review shows a suspected data breach involving unauthorized access to a customer database containing personal information. As the lead forensic investigator, you need to immediately secure the affected systems and collect evidence to determine the scope and impact of the breach. What is the most appropriate initial course of action, considering the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR? Option A. Immediately begin a comprehensive forensic imaging of all affected servers and workstations, prioritizing the preservation of all digital evidence, and then consult with the Data Protection Officer, DPO, regarding the scope of personal data involved and the lawful basis for further processing. Option B. Initiate a system-wide data sanitization process to remove any traces of unauthorized access, and then proceed with a less detailed forensic examination of the remaining system logs. Option C. Focus solely on identifying the technical vulnerability that allowed the breach, without collecting extensive data from the affected systems, to minimize the processing of personal data. Option D. Halt all investigative activities until explicit consent is obtained from each affected data subject for the processing of their personal data during the forensic investigation. The correct answer is A. Immediately begin a comprehensive forensic imaging of all affected servers and workstations, prioritizing the preservation of all digital evidence, and then consult with the Data Protection Officer, DPO, regarding the scope of personal data involved and the lawful basis for further processing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in computer forensics within organizations subject to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for a thorough forensic investigation to identify a security breach with the stringent requirements for processing personal data, including its lawful basis, minimization, and the rights of data subjects. The investigator must act decisively to contain the breach, while simultaneously ensuring that their actions do not inadvertently violate GDPR principles, which could lead to significant penalties and reputational damage. The pressure to act quickly to mitigate harm must be tempered by a commitment to legal and ethical data handling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment of the breach and securing evidence in a manner that aligns with GDPR principles. This involves identifying the scope of the personal data affected, implementing technical and organizational measures to prevent further unauthorized access or disclosure, and documenting all actions taken. Crucially, it necessitates consulting with the organization's Data Protection Officer, DPO, or legal counsel to ensure that the investigation and subsequent actions are conducted in compliance with GDPR, particularly regarding lawful processing, data minimization, and the potential need to notify supervisory authorities and data subjects. This approach demonstrates best professional practice by integrating forensic requirements with regulatory obligations, thereby protecting both the organization and the rights of individuals. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on evidence preservation without considering the GDPR implications of accessing and processing personal data, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could involve broad data collection that exceeds what is necessary for the investigation, thereby violating the principle of data minimization and potentially lacking a lawful basis for processing. It also risks infringing on the rights of data subjects, such as the right to be informed about data processing. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the investigation to obtain explicit consent for processing the personal data involved. While consent is a lawful basis for processing, it is often impractical and inappropriate in a security incident response scenario. The GDPR allows for processing personal data for the purposes of legitimate interests, such as protecting the organization from fraud or security threats, which would typically cover incident response. Delaying the investigation based on a misunderstanding of lawful bases would hinder the ability to protect the organization and its data subjects from further harm. Finally, an approach that involves deleting or altering data to clean up the system before a thorough forensic examination is a critical failure. This not only compromises the integrity of the evidence, making a proper investigation impossible, but also constitutes data destruction, which is a serious offense under GDPR and can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal a breach. It directly violates the principle of data integrity and availability and undermines the organization's ability to fulfill its legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a structured decision-making framework that integrates incident response protocols with regulatory compliance. This framework should include 1. Immediate assessment. Quickly understand the nature and scope of the incident. 2. Legal and compliance consultation. Engage the DPO or legal counsel early to determine the lawful basis for investigation activities and ensure adherence to GDPR. 3. Evidence preservation with minimization. Collect only the data necessary for the investigation, ensuring its integrity and chain of custody. 4. Containment and remediation. Implement measures to stop the breach and prevent recurrence, again with GDPR considerations. 5. Documentation. Meticulously record all actions, decisions, and justifications. 6. Notification. Based on legal advice, determine if supervisory authority and data subject notifications are required. This systematic approach ensures that critical security needs are met without compromising legal and ethical obligations. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate a high probability of an ongoing data exfiltration event on a critical production server. The incident response team has been alerted and needs to gather evidence to understand the scope of the breach and identify the attacker's methods. The server is actively processing sensitive customer data, and any disruption could impact business operations. The team must decide on the most appropriate initial evidence acquisition strategy to maximize the chances of capturing all relevant data, including transient information, while minimizing the risk of altering the evidence or causing system instability. Option A. Request the system administrator to remotely wipe the server to prevent further data loss. Option B. Begin a detailed manual review of application logs without acquiring any system data. Option C. Immediately shut down the server and perform a full forensic image of the non-volatile storage. Option D. Conduct a live acquisition of volatile data, including system memory and network connections, followed by a forensic image of the non-volatile storage. The correct answer is D. Conduct a live acquisition of volatile data, including system memory and network connections, followed by a forensic image of the non-volatile storage. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for timely evidence collection with the integrity and completeness of that evidence. The urgency of a potential data breach, coupled with the requirement to preserve volatile data, necessitates a careful decision regarding acquisition methodology. The professional challenge lies in selecting the method that best preserves the evidentiary chain of custody while minimizing the risk of data alteration or loss, all within the bounds of established forensic principles and relevant legal frameworks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of volatile data, which is crucial in incident response and breach investigations. Live acquisition, when performed correctly, allows for the capture of critical system states, memory contents, and network connections that are transient and would be lost upon system shutdown. This aligns with the fundamental forensic principle of maintaining the integrity of the evidence. Furthermore, in many jurisdictions, particularly those with stringent data breach notification laws, the ability to quickly assess the scope and nature of a potential breach through live analysis is paramount to meeting legal and regulatory obligations. An incorrect approach involving immediate static acquisition without considering volatile data would be professionally unacceptable. This is because shutting down a system to perform a static acquisition can destroy critical evidence residing in RAM, such as active network connections, running processes, and unencrypted data. This destruction of evidence can lead to an incomplete investigation, potentially allowing the threat actor to evade detection or further compromise systems. Ethically, it violates the duty to conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation. Legally, it could be challenged as a failure to preserve all relevant evidence, potentially impacting the admissibility of any findings. Another incorrect approach, performing a full static acquisition without any initial live analysis, fails to address the immediate threat and the potential loss of volatile data. While static acquisition is essential for non-volatile data, delaying it to perform a live acquisition first is often necessary in time-sensitive incident response scenarios. A professional reasoning process should involve an initial assessment of the situation to determine the criticality of volatile data. If volatile data is likely to be relevant and transient, a live acquisition should be prioritized. This decision-making process should be guided by established forensic methodologies, organizational policies, and an understanding of the potential legal and regulatory implications of evidence preservation. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a data breach involving sensitive customer information. Following the discovery of a potential intrusion, the incident response team has confirmed unauthorized access to a database containing personally identifiable information, PI. What is the most appropriate immediate next step to ensure regulatory compliance and effective incident management? Option A. Focus solely on containing the intrusion and restoring system integrity, deferring any notification efforts until all technical remediation is finalized. Option B. Issue a public statement acknowledging a security incident and assuring customers that the company is investigating, without detailing the specific data compromised until the investigation is complete. Option C. Notify all customers immediately about a potential data breach, providing general information about the incident and advising them to change their passwords. Option D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to determine the full scope of the breach and the specific types of PII accessed, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel to interpret notification requirements. Correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to determine the full scope of the breach and the specific types of PII accessed, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel to interpret notification requirements. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to contain a security incident with the legal and ethical obligations to notify affected parties and regulatory bodies. The CISSP, with a computer forensics concentration, must navigate a complex web of regulations, organizational policies, and technical realities to ensure a compliant and effective response. The pressure to act quickly to mitigate further damage must be weighed against the meticulous data gathering and analysis required for accurate breach notification. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured incident response process that aligns with regulatory requirements for data breach notification. By immediately engaging the incident response team and initiating forensic investigation, the organization ensures that the scope and impact of the breach are accurately determined. This thoroughness is critical for fulfilling legal obligations under frameworks like the U.S. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for protected health information, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, for personal information, which mandate timely and specific notifications based on the nature of the compromised data. Ethical considerations also demand transparency and prompt communication with affected individuals to allow them to take protective measures. An incorrect approach that delays notification or notification without a proper forensic understanding would fail to meet regulatory mandates. For instance, under HIPAA, failure to notify without unreasonable delay can result in significant penalties. Similarly, under CCPA, a delayed or incomplete notification could lead to regulatory action and loss of consumer trust. Another incorrect approach, such as notifying broadly without specific details about the compromised data, might technically satisfy a notification requirement, but would be ethically deficient and potentially legally insufficient if specific data types trigger different notification thresholds or timelines. This lack of precision undermines the purpose of notification, which is to inform individuals about the specific risks they face. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate incident containment and escalation to the incident response team. This team should then initiate a forensic investigation to determine the nature, scope, and impact of the breach, including the types of data compromised and the number of individuals affected. Concurrently, legal counsel and compliance officers should be engaged to interpret applicable regulations and guide the notification process. This integrated approach ensures that all legal, regulatory, and ethical obligations are met while effectively managing the incident.